3 days ago, 4 human beings climbed into a capsule the size of a large SUV, strapped themselves on top of the most powerful rocket ever successfully launched, and blasted off toward the moon. As of right now, they are somewhere between the Earth and the moon, hurtling through deep space at thousands of miles per hour, farther from home than any human being has traveled in over half a century. And if you watch the coverage, you saw the celebration. You saw the tears at mission control inside Kennedy Space Center. You heard the word historic about 400 times. But here's what the press conferences and the highlight reels didn't spend much time on. The heat shield on this spacecraft cracked in over 100 places the last time it flew. The program has burned through $93 billion and counting. And weeks before launch, a former astronaut who literally flew the post-Columbia return to flight mission went on the record saying this vehicle is not safe to carry a crew. Getting to this launch was its own saga. Artemis II was originally supposed to fly in late 2024. It slipped to September 2025 because of the heat shield issues, then to April 2026 in December 2024. An attempt to pull forward to February 2026 was killed by a liquid hydrogen leak during testing. Then a helium flow blockage in the upper stage forced engineers to roll the entire rocket back to the vehicle assembly building for repairs in February, pushing to April. After all that, the April 1st launch went off on the first attempt. CNN called it a shockingly smooth launch day, which honestly felt like the universe's way of apologizing for 3 years of chaos. So why did NASA fly it anyway? And what does this mission actually mean for the future of space exploration? Let's get into it. First, let's talk about what Artemis II actually is, because a lot of people are confused about this. This is not a moon landing. Nobody is walking on the lunar surface. What 4 astronauts are doing right now is flying a giant loop around the moon on what's called a free return trajectory, basically a figure-8 path that uses the moon's gravity to sling the Orion spacecraft around and send it back toward Earth. The whole trip takes about 10 days and covers roughly 685,000 miles. The free return trajectory is actually a deliberate safety choice. If the main engine on Orion completely dies after the initial boost toward the moon, gravity alone carries the crew around and back home. That's the same principle that saved the Apollo 13 crew back in 1970 when their oxygen tank exploded and they had to abort. So NASA essentially built a cosmic safety net into the flight path. At its farthest point, Orion will reach approximately 252,000 miles from Earth. That beats the all-time human distance record set by Apollo 13's crew by about 3,300 miles. Think about that for a second. The last time humans were this far from Earth, Richard Nixon was in the White House, and the internet didn't exist. During the 10-day mission, the crew isn't just sitting around staring out the window, although Christina Koch did radio back that she was glued to the view of Earth glowing in moonlight. They're running real tests that matter for future missions. They're evaluating Orion's life support systems under actual biological conditions for the first time, because Artemis I was uncrewed, so nobody had ever breathed the air, used the toilet, or generated body heat inside this spacecraft. They're testing a laser communication system that can transmit data at 260 megabits per second, fast enough for near real-time 4K video from deep space. They're practicing proximity operations with the spent rocket upper stage to simulate future docking maneuvers. And they're carrying organ-on-a-chip experiments using their own blood samples to study how deep space radiation affects human tissue. The rocket making this happen is the Space Launch System, and this thing is an absolute monster. It stands 322 feet tall and generates 8.8 million pounds of thrust at liftoff. That's about 15% more than the Saturn V that took Apollo astronauts to the moon. The core stage uses 4 RS-25 engines, which are basically repurposed space shuttle main engines, flanked by 2 massive solid rocket boosters that provide over 75% of the thrust during the first 2 minutes of flight. And here's the wild part. The entire rocket is expendable. Every piece of it gets thrown away. Nothing is recovered or reused. Now let's talk about the crew, because these 4 people are carrying some serious history on their shoulders. Commander Reed Wiseman is a 50-year-old Navy captain and former F-14 and F-18 test pilot from Baltimore. He spent 165 days aboard the International Space Station back in 2014 and became known for his prolific social media posts from orbit. But his personal story is what hits hardest. His wife Carol died of cancer in 2020 while he was serving as chief of the astronaut office. He stepped away from flight duties to raise their 2 daughters as a single parent before eventually returning to active status. Before this launch, he told reporters that he sat his kids down and walked them through where the will is, where the trust documents are, and what happens to them if he doesn't come home. His elderly father, battling declining health, told the Baltimore Banner he wanted to stay alive long enough to see the launch. That is real stakes. That is not a press release. The pilot is Victor Glover, 49 years old, and he just became the first black person to travel beyond low Earth orbit. He's a Navy captain from Pomona, California with the call sign Ike, which stands for I Know Everything, given to him by a commanding officer. He flew 24 combat missions over Iraq, graduated from Air Force Test Pilot School, and was working as a legislative fellow in Senator John McCain's office when he got selected as an astronaut. On SpaceX Crew 1, he became the first black astronaut to complete a long-duration stay aboard the International Space Station. His grandfather served in the Air Force during the Korean War, but faced barriers that prevented him from pursuing aviation. Victor's journey to the moon completes something his family started generations ago. Mission specialist Christina Koch is 47 years old and just became the first woman to travel beyond low Earth orbit in the history of human spaceflight. Her 328 consecutive days aboard the space station set the record for the longest single spaceflight by a woman. She performed the first all-female spacewalk with Jessica Meir in October 2019. But here's what makes her story wild. Before she ever became an astronaut, she spent 3.5 years working in Antarctica, including a full winter at the South Pole Station where temperatures dropped to negative 111 degrees Fahrenheit. She told her kindergarten teacher she wanted to be an astronaut and went to space camp multiple times as a kid. Sometimes the universe actually lets you have the thing you wished for. And then there's Jeremy Hansen, 50 years old, a colonel in the Royal Canadian Air Force, and the first Canadian and first non-American to ever travel beyond Earth orbit. This is also his first spaceflight, making him the only rookie on the crew. He flew CF-18 fighters and earned his pilot's wings at age 16 through the Air Cadets program. He grew up on a farm near Ailsa Craig, Ontario. His personal mission patch was designed by Anishinaabe artist Henry Guimond and incorporates the 7 sacred laws of Indigenous tradition. He's carrying the Innu Nation flag aboard Orion. Canada earned this crew slot through their commitment to build Canadarm3 for the future Lunar Gateway Station. Now here's where things get uncomfortable, because we need to talk about the heat shield. When the uncrewed Artemis I mission returned to Earth in December 2022, engineers found that the Avcoat heat shield on the Orion capsule had suffered unexpected damage in over 100 locations. This wasn't the smooth, predictable burning away that the shield was designed to do. These were deep gouges where chunks of material cracked and ejected during re-entry. NASA spent 2 full years investigating before they announced the root cause in December 2024. What they found was that during Orion's skip re-entry, where the capsule dips in and out of the atmosphere to bleed off speed, gases produced during the ablation process couldn't escape through the Avcoat material fast enough. Pressure built up inside the heat shield blocks and cracked them apart from within. And here is the detail that should make you sit up straight. The Artemis II heat shield was manufactured to be even less permeable than the Artemis I shield, the exact opposite of what the investigation determined was needed. A redesigned, more breathable heat shield won't be ready until Artemis III. NASA's fix for Artemis II was to change the re-entry trajectory. Instead of the skip re-entry that caused the cracking, they switched to a steeper, more direct plunge that reduces the time the shield spends in the dangerous temperature range. An independent review panel led by Paul Hill, who was the shuttle return-to-flight director after Columbia, endorsed this approach after 3 months of analysis. But not everyone agreed. Dr. Charles Camarda, a former astronaut who literally flew on the Space Shuttle Discovery's return-to-flight mission after the Columbia disaster, went public with his concerns. He told CNN that NASA's approach was, in his words, reckless, and that the agency was building simplified computer models to justify a conclusion they'd already reached, rather than doing rigorous physics-based testing. He drew explicit parallels to the organizational culture that preceded both the Challenger and Columbia shuttle disasters, where engineers raised red flags that management overruled. He published a detailed document arguing NASA was repeating the exact same institutional mistakes that killed 14 astronauts across those 2 shuttle tragedies. The NASA Inspector General's report from May 2024 added more fuel to the fire. It identified 3 potentially fatal risks from Artemis II, including the heat shield cracking, possible debris hitting the parachute compartment, and the alarming finding that 3 of 4 separation bolts embedded in the heat shield had their thermal barriers completely melted through because of a flawed heating model. The Inspector General warned this could result in hot gas getting behind the shield, exceeding the capsule's structural limits, and destroying the vehicle with the crew inside. On top of the heat shield, Artemis I recorded 24 instances of radiation-induced power system glitches, electronic circuit breakers tripping unexpectedly during the flight. Only software patches were applied for Artemis II, no hardware changes. And this mission is flying near the peak of solar cycle 25, when radiation levels in deep space are elevated. And perhaps the most sobering fact of all. Once Orion fires its engine toward the moon, there is no rescue. No spacecraft on Earth can reach them. During the roughly 45 minutes the crew spends behind the far side of the moon, all communication with Earth is completely severed. If something goes wrong, mission control can't even hear them. During re-entry at 25,000 miles per hour, if the heat shield fails, there is absolutely nothing anyone can do. The review panel's own leader acknowledged that even after all their analysis, it would still be scary. Now let's talk about money, because the price tag on this program is genuinely staggering. The NASA Inspector General estimated the total Artemis program cost at approximately $93 billion through fiscal year 2025. That covers the Space Launch System, Orion, ground systems, the Human Landing System, and all associated infrastructure. Each SLS launch runs roughly $4.1 billion. For context, SpaceX launches a Falcon Heavy rocket for somewhere between $90 million and $150 million. The overruns have been relentless. When Congress authorized the SLS program back in 2010, the target was $11.5 billion over 6 years. The SLS development alone has consumed nearly $24 billion. Boeing's core stage contract ballooned from $4.2 billion to a projected $8.9 billion. And despite what the NASA Inspector General called Boeing's poor performance as the primary cost driver, NASA rated Boeing's work as excellent or very good and awarded them 90% of available performance bonuses. Let that math sink in for a second. Actually, let me rephrase. Think about that. You double the budget, deliver years late, and still collect a 90% bonus. Not a bad gig. The political reality behind SLS is an open secret in the aerospace community. Critics have called it the Senate launch system because its contracts were strategically distributed across key states. Utah got the solid rocket boosters. Alabama got the core stage work at Marshall Space Flight Center. Florida got billions for Kennedy Space Center upgrades. Cost-plus contracts, which reimburse every dollar a contractor spends plus a guaranteed fee, eliminated any financial incentive to control costs. Even former NASA Administrator Bill Nelson once called cost-plus contracting a plague. Now, here's why all of this matters beyond just America's space program. Because the new space race is real, and it is tighter than people realize. While NASA spent years wrestling with heat shield investigations, schedule delays, and budget overruns, China's space program was executing with almost unnerving precision. In 2019, China achieved the world's first landing on the far side of the moon with Chang'e 4. In June 2024, Chang'e 6 completed the first ever sample return from the lunar far side, bringing back nearly 2 kilograms of material from the South Pole Aitken Basin. No other country has done either of those things, and China is not slowing down. They are actively building the hardware for a crewed lunar landing before 2030. The Long March 10 heavy-lift rocket, the Mengzhou crew capsule, and the Lanyu crewed lander are all in advanced testing. On February 11, 2026, just weeks before Artemis II's final launch preparations at Kennedy Space Center, China conducted a dual test of the Long March 10 and Mengzhou systems. Both tests succeeded. They also demonstrated their first booster recovery at sea. So here's the timeline that keeps NASA leadership up at night. America's next crewed lunar landing, now designated Artemis IV, is targeting 2028 at the earliest. But that depends entirely on SpaceX's Starship being ready to serve as the lunar lander, which requires proving out orbital propellant transfer using 10 to 14 tanker flights. As of now, that capability remains undemonstrated. NASA's own safety panel warned in 2025 that the human landing system is significantly challenged and could be years late. Meanwhile, new NASA Administrator Jared Isaacman confirmed in December 2025 has completely overhauled the program. He canceled the planned SLS Block 1B and Block 2 upgrades, redesigned Artemis III from a lunar landing to a 30-day orbit demonstration mission, and paused the Lunar Gateway space station in favor of a $20 billion lunar surface base concept. The entire architecture is being rebuilt on the fly. China is targeting 2029 to 2030 for their first crewed landing, with hardware already in testing and no dependence on unproven refueling technology. If you're doing the math, you can see why this makes people nervous. The competition isn't just about planting flags either. Two competing frameworks for who gets to make the rules on the moon are taking shape right now. The United States leads the Artemis Accords, which 61 nations have signed as of January 2026. China leads the International Lunar Research Station partnership with 13 nations. Whoever establishes permanent infrastructure first gets to shape how humanity operates on the lunar surface for decades to come. That's not science fiction. That's geopolitics happening in real time. If you're finding this breakdown valuable, consider subscribing. We cover space and science stories like this every week, going deeper than the headlines. So where does all of this leave us? Right now, 4 astronauts are approaching the moon inside a capsule with a heat shield that experts disagree about. Funded by a program that has cost nearly $100 billion, racing a competitor that spent a fraction of that budget and executes with remarkable consistency. The crew is expected to swing behind the far side of the moon around April 6, spending roughly 45 minutes in total radio silence with 0 Earth contact. Then comes the moment everyone is watching: re-entry. When the Orion capsule hits Earth's atmosphere at 25,000 miles per hour, and that controversial heat shield has to perform exactly as NASA predicts or not. Splashdown is targeted for around April 11 in the Pacific Ocean. If everything goes right, Artemis II proves that America's path back to the moon is viable. If something goes wrong, the consequences extend far beyond one mission. They reshape the entire future of human space exploration and could hand the momentum of the new space race directly to China. And there's something poetic about the timing. On April 3, Commander Wiseman shared the first photographs taken by astronauts from deep space in over 5 decades. Those images of Earth, small and blue and impossibly fragile against the blackness, went everywhere. They reminded people why we do this in the first place. Not because of politics or contracts, but because there's something in us that needs to know what's out there. Either way, what's happening right now in orbit between the Earth and the Moon is the most significant human spaceflight mission in over 50 years, and the whole world is watching.